Day. I would submit that it's a strange liberation and a...
This may look like a routine policy exchange, but it's actually a stress test of economic accountability. What's really being tested here is whether bold industrial promises can survive contact with real-world data and whether power answers to evidence or optics. This raises broader questions about how trade policy is justified, who bears the costs during transitions, and what accountability looks like when timelines slip. In this video, we'll break down the gap between assurances and outcomes, the limits of wait-and-see governance, and why job numbers, not intentions, decide credibility.
Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Chair Scott, and welcome, Secretary Bessent. President Trump promised that his administration would usher in a, quote, golden age of American manufacturing. In September 2024, at a rally in my home state of Georgia, Donald Trump said, quote, "We're going to have a manufacturing boom." Secretary Bessent, we're now more than 1 year into the Trump administration. Yes or no? Has there been a manufacturing boom in the United States?
There are the beginnings of a manufacturing boom. We have intentions, factory groundbreakings, sir.
So your answer to that is yes, there's been a manufacturing boom?
That we are at the beginning of a manufacturing boom.
Okay, you and I could agree to disagree. But more importantly, manufacturers are telling us something different. Manufacturers are struggling because of the president's policies, and that's what they keep telling us, and the facts keep telling us. In fact, just this past Monday, the Wall Street Journal published this article entitled, "U.S. Manufacturing is in Retreat, and Trump's tariffs aren't helping." I request consent to enter this article into the hearing record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
Secretary Bessent, do you know how many manufacturing jobs the United States has lost since Liberation Day in April 2025? When the president first announced his tariffs?
Yes, Senator, because you were out of the room, but it was already brought up.
We do many things, sir. I don't need you to tell me where I was.
72,000, and I will point out that the Wall Street Journal
72,000
is not called the Main Street Journal, and they care more about Wall Street than Main
Sir,
Street.
I'm not asking you to opine on the Wall Street Journal. I have 3 minutes. Just answer the questions that I'm actually asking you. So 72,000 manufacturing jobs, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. Thank you for answering the question. Manufacturers shed workers in each of the 8 months after President Trump unveiled his tariffs on what he called Liberation Day. I would submit that it's a strange liberation and a curious freedom that leaves you unemployed. Even worse, smaller businesses are struggling to keep up with the tariff chaos. Big manufacturers may have the resources to shift suppliers. And I need you to understand the spirit of my questions. I spend a lot of time talking to the people in Georgia who've given me the great honor of representing them in the United States Senate. And so this is about them. And especially our small businesses. They don't have the ear of the president. They don't have access to Mar-a-Lago. And so they're not able to insulate their company from the worst of the tariffs. Secretary Bessent, small businesses without the same resources or unfettered access to the president, what should those businesses do for the relief if they can't get into Mar-a-Lago?
Again, sir, small business confidence is up. And we are seeing that the one big beautiful bill gives the full expensing for equipment, factories, and ag structures.
They are telling us that it's more expensive to make basic things. We are moving in the wrong direction. The facts don't lie. The president lies often, but the facts don't lie. In fact, if you're saying we're at the beginning, basically your answer to those small businesses is wait a little while. Is that the answer? That a year from
you ask about manufacturing.
That's right.
So
I'm asking you,
and I am saying
I'm asking you about this manufacturing boom. Will we see something different a year from now?
We are going to see it. I was just in my home state, Senator Scott's state, South Carolina, that we are seeing a boom there, and I believe Georgia has very good pro-business policies. I'm sure you will see a boom there also. The factory build intentions are quite high.
I'll tell you what I see. I see, as I talk to folks, that it's more expensive to build things in America. I see that we've lost 72,000 jobs a year into this administration. We've lost manufacturing jobs every month since he called for Liberation Day. And meanwhile, folks who are working in these small businesses trying to make their lives work, they're seeing higher costs. They're seeing their costs go up for groceries. They're seeing their costs go up for electricity. They're seeing their costs go up for healthcare. And I think the American people are still waiting for a solution. So far, we haven't seen one coming out of this Trump tariffs regime. The Baptist preacher is done, and I have no time left. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Inflation.
Senator Ricketts.
In that moment, the exchange stopped being theoretical and became unmistakably real. When Senator Raphael Warnock pressed Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on the promise of a so-called manufacturing boom, the answer never fully arrived. What did arrive was a number, 72,000. 72,000 manufacturing jobs gone since tariffs were announced with fanfare and framed as liberation. And in the silence that followed, the weight of that number settled over the room. Because this was never just a debate about policy language or economic forecasts. It was a direct collision between promises made on campaign stages and the lived reality of people trying to keep their businesses open, their costs manageable, and their futures stable. Warnock didn't raise his voice to make his point. He didn't need to. He let the facts speak, and in doing so, exposed the widening gap between rhetoric and results. President Trump promised a golden age of American manufacturing. He promised a boom. He promised revival. But a year into the administration, what emerged in this hearing was not evidence of resurgence, but an argument about intentions. Groundbreakings, plans, projections, always just over the horizon. And for families and small business owners living in the present, that distinction matters more than any slogan. What Warnock laid bare was the cost of waiting. Month after month of job losses, rising expenses for the basics of everyday life. And a system that appears to reward access over fairness, influence over need. When he spoke about small businesses lacking the ability to insulate themselves from policy swings, he wasn't speaking in abstractions. He was speaking about people who don't have the ear of power, who don't have invitations or back channels, who don't get to hedge against chaos. This is where the exchange became something deeper than a partisan clash. It became a question of governance. Who is policy actually designed to serve? When sweeping economic decisions are made, who absorbs the shock first? And who is asked, again and again, to simply wait a little longer? Secretary Bessent spoke of beginnings, of faith in future outcomes, of optimism rooted in what might be coming next year. But Warnock grounded the conversation in what is happening now, in factories shedding workers, in higher costs rippling through communities, in the growing sense that accountability is always deferred, while consequences are immediate. There was a striking moment when Warnock described this so-called liberation as a freedom that leaves people without work. It was a simple line, but it carried moral force. Because freedom in the American tradition has never been meant to feel like abandonment. Prosperity has never been defined as something only accessible to those with proximity to power. This hearing exposed a familiar pattern in modern American politics. Big promises paired with vague timelines. Hard data met with softer reassurances, and leadership measured not by outcomes, but by confidence in eventual success. Yet history shows us that faith alone does not build stability. Trust is earned when words align with results, when leadership confronts inconvenient facts rather than reframing them. Warnock's questions weren't about scoring points. They were about responsibility, about what happens when the cost of policy decisions lands unevenly, and those least equipped to absorb it are told to be patient, about whether the American system still recognizes the difference between aspiration and delivery. In moments like this, hearings serve their highest purpose. They pull the curtain back, they force clarity. They remind us that behind every statistic is a household, a workshop, a storefront trying to survive shifting economic ground. And they challenge those in power to answer not just with optimism, but with evidence. As the gavel moves on and the cameras fade, the questions raised here do not disappear. They linger. They follow us beyond the hearing room into communities where costs are rising faster than confidence and where patience has limits. Because a democracy is not sustained by promises alone. It is sustained by accountability. By leaders willing to confront reality as it is, not as they hope it will become. and by citizens who refuse to look away when the numbers tell a different story than the speeches. This moment matters because it reminds us that power must be questioned, not applauded by default. That economic policy is not a branding exercise, but a moral choice. And that the measure of leadership is not how convincingly it predicts the future, but how honestly it addresses the present. If you believe these moments deserve scrutiny, if you believe facts should never be overshadowed by slogans, support our work to expose the truth. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA.